This is my first of what will be 12 weeks, probably, of entries. This week, Rhoda Martin shared, and her title was Nature and Character of God. So I'm going to kind of run through my notes and just kind of speak out loud what it was meaning to me and what it was telling me. Just because there's a lot of things that I processed and I thought through. So I might break this up into different sections. For example, like when talking about the first day, I'll probably break that up, have one section, just so it doesn't get too long. So yeah. So the first day Rhoda came in, she started talking, and the first thing we were supposed to do was find a thing from nature to symbolize why we're here. And as before, I picked up a coconut because I was like, well, it's something cool and unique that I can that like nobody else is gonna have, and then I can also like relate my story to it. And so I picked up a coconut, and I was like, yeah, this is me. I'm like partially of the way ripe, but I'm not quite ripe yet. And because of that, I am desiring to be more of ripe so that I can like be more of a nourishment to other people. But in my mind, I was actually thinking like I'm basically ripe. Like I'm here to nourish other people. I'm not here to nourish myself because I basically have it all together. A lot of what came through camp and stuff like that, and stuff I didn't necessarily think about. Like I didn't actually think about the fact that I was like, okay, I am fully nourished. But in the back of my mind, that's what I thought. And so what happened with the coconut is that it kind of started bringing things to the surface a little bit more. It made me realize like what I was actually thinking about or focusing on, but still not completely aware. So then we ended that, and like everyone through theirs, and it was really cool just because like we got to see everybody's and see their reasoning behind it. And yeah, I think if I could do it over again, I would probably pick up a stone from one of the buildings, like a stone that's just lying beside it, because what happened next, throughout the week and throughout that day, was that God took this kind of shambles of a building that I was building myself, that I was putting together, and He kind of tore it down. And so I started on the foundation, and how a lot of these walls are kind of crumbling, and they're falling down. They're weathered, they're torn, and but yet a lot of them still stand because they're on a good foundation, and that's what I wanted to be for Christ. And so we're going through. She said she was like a flower, and then she said a simple phrase that DTS doesn't change anybody, Jesus and God does. And like immediately it kind of triggered my like, oh yeah, I know that because I'm a Christian. But then when I really like thought about it, I was like, no, I don't. I don't know this. Like for me, it's as I'm sitting there, I don't realize that like the places I'm at, the situations that I'm in, that's not what's changing me. That's not what's shaping me. God is. And so often we become consumed with, okay, well, what's going on here? What do we have to do here? What do we have to, how can we be better in this situation? Or like, yeah, this part of my life really shaped me. But then it's looking at the tools that God used to shape you instead of looking at what God Himself did in your life. I think back to like just my years in with suicide and depression, how like a lot of times I attribute me getting out of that state to counseling. And like, yes, that was the tool that God used. Being able to talk to my parents finally was a tool that God used, but it wasn't actually what got me out. God was what got me out. And so that made it so much more real to me, because I was like, DTS doesn't change you, God does. DTS is just the tool that God uses to change you. And when you think about it that way, instead of praising or worshiping the tool, you worship what is behind the tool. Which actually comes into something else in my day 4. But yeah, we'll move on. So she went into eternal life, and like, what is eternal life? And I rephrased that with it, like, have we ever not lived eternal life? Because ever since we were born, like, we've either lived eternally and not in a relationship with God, which means that we'll live eternally in hell, or eternally with God, which means that we'll live eternally in heaven. But we all have eternity, like eternal living. We just don't have it here on the earth. And so, like, it's not a question of when did we start living an eternal lifestyle. It's when did we start living the right eternal lifestyle, and what that means and what that affects, how that affects what we do and like who we are. So yeah, then she told her story a little bit, and then talked about Peter and having enough faith to get out of the boat, but lost it from the storm. And she was like starting to introduce to us kind of like the nature and character of God, and like how even in our storms, God asks us questions, not solves our problems. How even when Peter was sinking, after God saved him, after like God like stopped him from sinking, God wasn't like, hey, like, you did good, you got there, but he's like, why do you have so little faith? Like, why do you not trust in me? Why do you let the storms and everything else get you down? And I think Peter's just kind of baffled by that, as is like the rest of us. Because so often we're just like, hey, like, I'm doing good, I'm doing good, and like we look at what the good we're doing, and then we get to a point that we really struggle with something, and we very quickly, very quickly, get caught up on the bad and not the good, and how we've failed instead of how we've succeeded in God's eyes. And in actuality, we're succeeding all the time in God's eyes. But because we're so accustomed to trying to earn approval, earn our way, we get caught on that bad because that's us failing. That's us not achieving the goal. It kind of reminds me of the one night we were throwing frisbee at the pool, and we started throwing it from the top of the sugar mill to try to get into the pool, and then wait for one to get it into the dining hall. And I remember, like, I went up and I threw it the first time, and I completely shanked it. And so I altered my throw. I threw it the second time, was like a really good throw into the pool. And so then Christian came up and Dom came up, and we started throwing. And it was interesting. We ended up, like, both Christian and Dom got on their second tries. I actually think Dom got on his first try. And then we started trying to throw it into the dining hall. And so we tried for a while, and like we all failed. And then we were talking about it. I think it was like 2 days later, and we were like, "Oh yeah, it was awesome. Like, we'll have to do it again." And Dom said something to the effect of, "Yeah, I never made it into the dining hall." And I was like, "Yeah, but you got on the second try on the pool." He's like, "Really? I don't remember that." And like, maybe something that was like kind of simple for him, but to me, it just like kind of drew out the fact that like we focus on our failures. We focus on what goes wrong so often that sometimes we fail to see what God is doing right in our lives. Because so often we consume ourselves with how much of a failure I am, how much I'm not worthy, and at least for me, it turns into just not that, but even more so of a I'm not worthy and I don't deserve this. And so I start really hating myself or loathing myself, because it's no longer just I'm undeserving, but God's grace circumcedes. But it's I'm undeserving, I don't deserve this. Right. God's there for me. and you get so caught up in those times that you're undeserving and you don't deserve, that you forget who God is and what He gives you. Yeah, so Jesus meets us in our storm, but He asks us a question so that we can ponder and realize to come to Him instead of Him just being where we're at. And then one of the points I'll hit on later, just because it kind of wraps everything up really well. But Jesus had one mission. What is your will, God? Stop, listen, and obey. She hit on it the first night. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video, and then I'm going to start another one, just because I want to break it up a little bit. But I'm going to go into next my radical encounter with God on the first day.